Lonnie Clark with my co-host, Louisa Hamachek, on The Last Nuke, a radio program dedicated to help us permanently close the Columbia Generating Station, or as we call it, CGS.
CGS is the last commercial nuclear power plant in the Pacific Northwest at the federal Hanford Nuclear Site on the Columbia River in Richland, Washington. It's on top of newly discovered large earthquake faults, which could cause severe damage, resulting in a meltdown with radioactive fallout dust blowing in the winds of the Northwest. And the contaminated cooling waters could spill into the Columbia River, passing Portland on its way into the Pacific Ocean.
Join us each week as we share information and actions we are taking to realize the immediate permanent shutdown of the CGS nuclear power plant to help safeguard our families, our friends, animals, and our environment. Thanks for joining us. Good evening. This is Lonnie Clark and Louisa Hamachek, and we are the hosts of The Last Nuke. And we're here, I think it's our third show, right, Louisa?
Yep.
And we're going to be doing 25 minutes together. We're going to make this, we're making it as a YouTube video for my Nuts for Art YouTube channel, but it's mostly going to be like for a podcast, for the Last Nuke podcast, which I'm putting up on my Spreaker channel, Spreaker, Spreaker.com. You can look under Lonnie Clark. And the shows I have, the Age of Fission, I beg your pardon, Nuclear Hot Seat, Operation Save the Earth, and we're going to also post up The Last Nuke. So
on KEPW.
And on KEPW, we are submitting it to be a show that's a half an hour once a week, and we think it's going to be on Thursdays at 7:30 to 8.
And this is our new community radio station that's at... It's in the old Growers Market building downtown, across from the train station in the center of Eugene. And it goes out 24 miles to the community of the Eugene and Springfield area. And it's Eugene Peaceworks gave us half their office as space and are the over umbrella for this community radio station. We're really glad to bring this information out on KEPW.
Well, let's be clear. Eugene Peaceworks office is KEPW's office.
Yeah.
It's not like they gave them half the space. They're like, Eugene Peaceworks was the original nonprofit.
And for years we've had Eugene Peaceworks in Eugene putting out a newspaper once every 3 months or so about the peace and environmental nuclear issues in the Northwest. And then they were affiliated with Oregon Peaceworks, and it retreated to Eugene Peaceworks, and now has reblossomed like mycorrhizal. It's come back out as a radio station. It's so cool.
Well, what's cool is they got a bid. They actually put in a bid for an FM radio station in 2016, and they won.
Yay.
And so they don't give
Whatever
it. They
means.
gave out 18 that year, and Eugene Peaceworks got it. They hadn't given one out in like 30, 40 years, and it was the end result of like some court order that said to the FCC, you have to give out more FM stations, and people bid. Yeah. It was kind of like a fairness in reporting. So here we are on KEPW begging them. Yeah. We're not begging them. They've actually offered, if we produce a decent enough show that is entertaining enough, they'll put us on the air, and that's our goal with this show, The Last Nuke.
Yeah, and really our goal is to inform our resident friends and neighbors about the need to shut down the Columbia Generating Station, and so it's a great way to get out the information.
Exactly, and immediately. Mm-hmm. Like, it is such a grave danger. People don't even realize the grave danger that the Columbia Generating Station is putting the entire Northwest. We're not alarmists. We're actually looking at documents and facts. And
we've been shown things from other activists with authoritative science-based environmental groups like Physicians for Social Responsibility has organized a lot of the good research that's going on, because these are scientists who are doctors who are doing that, and nurses and all kinds of health practitioners of the Northwest are in the Oregon, Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility, concerned with cancer and birth defects from the radiation.
Mm-hmm. So it's beyond. This is a thing. We know that it is in danger, This last week, the Department of Ecology up at Hanford, they basically, Hanford.gov, they came out with a report that basically outlines the horrible state of affairs up there, that buildings are collapsing, there's a lot of contamination. There are some areas that they're planning on demolitioning, and they're having proposals for that. But some areas they're just saying, "Hey, we're not even planning for that yet." They don't say they're not going to. They just say they're not going to plan for it. So comprehend that the Columbia Generating Station is on the Hanford site. Mm-hmm. Louisa has corrected me on that because I was always saying it's only 12 miles, but it's actually on the Hanford Reservation site. It's on Hanford. And it's contaminated all over the place. Like, they've been working on this over the years in different places, and then they just sort of conveniently forget, and then they rebuild, and it's beyond comprehension, the level of gross neglect.
And there were so many different formats of throwing or leaving or storing the nuclear waste that came in different formats. Like, there are 17 nuclear reactor cores that are somewheres up at the Hanford Reservation, which is the whole Hanford thing is like a bend in the river about 40 miles long. And the center of it is who you need to go to is Columbia Riverkeepers.org. And probably, anyways, Columbia Riverkeepers have an excellent brochure, a whole booklet on the water concerns around Hanford, and they have a map of all the different research and the plutonium production reactors. There were 7 operating nuclear power plants in the bend in the river there on the Hanford Reservation in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and they stopped in the 80s and left this one, the Columbia Generating Station, that could create electricity instead, and they converted it to a commercial nuclear power plant instead of a plutonium grade weapons creation thing, or maybe it's still doing it. We're not sure. I know that they got stopped by the other group, Heart of America Northwest. Jerry Paulette said that his group, I think along with Sierra Club, caught them they were about to slip in some MOX fuel and burn that in the nuclear power plant when refueling one year, and they got caught at it by these environmental groups. And said, no, you don't, because MOX means mixed oxide fuels that they have mixed some plutonium waste in with, and some other various substances. And so now they're coming up with a Russian mix. It's like a cocktail of a mixture of various MOX fuels coming together and different things. But at any rate, Jerry Paulette pointed out at a public hearing previous to them, he would give little talks to inform us what it was about. And he said that fuel, if there was a meltdown like Chernobyl or Fukushima, where it exploded the stuff up into the air of all the pieces of things, like the reactor core plus the containment building and all that flying up into the air and then becoming ash that blows around the world in 26 days, that it would contain particles of plutonium. And that's so much hotter than uranium. It's so much more radioactive. It's so deadly. Any particle that will kill whatever it touches. You cannot live if a particle of plutonium touches you.
Well, that's the thing. The risk of that is very minimal. That's what they say, because there's not that much, quote, that much.
Except for the earthquake now.
Exactly. And this is the thing. It's not just the earthquake. But check this out. I want to say this. For our audiences that are on the YouTube, I'm holding up a drawing of gross hand drawing, and this is for our audience that is audio, of kind of like how the Columbia River curves around like a big loop, like a big wide sea, right? So Louisa's and her friends had this idea of building a canal just cutting off the river coming down from Washington straight down practically across to Portland.
I must give Toby Grant this idea because he thought it up and he passed on a few years ago. But he thought it up. He is the descendant of Ulysses S. Grant, or something like grandson, whatever it is. Anyways, he was my best friend, and he went to many public hearings with me, and he tried to bring this up, but he brought up anything he could at the public hearings that was helpful. But this was always in the back of his head, and then he passed on. So I want to carry it on.
And they've never
Toby's
submitted
idea.
it, but I think this is a great idea. You basically build a canal from Washington down to the border, to the river at the bottom, where the border of Oregon and Washington is.
No, you don't. No, it's not there. We need to show it on a different thing. It's a bend in the river above Richland. It comes back together. You'd cut back into the thing above, right around Richland.
Oh, so you go to Richland, you stay in Washington and cut it off in Washington.
Yeah, and because then the river makes another bend.
It's still the same effect.
No, you think that this is the bend in there. Yeah, we need to do it with another drawing of another river.
This may not be accurate, but my point is, I drew, for the audio people that are listening to this, this is my gross, like, chicken scratch idea to show this, because I think the idea of putting a canal connecting the two bottom parts of the river and drawing a canal and then isolating,
bypassing the poison part of the Columbia and with radioactive poison.
This can dry out. The part over here that you're cutting it off on the east side can actually dry out, and they can actually remediate it better when it's not soaking.
Yeah, and
I mean, they can actually cut off that part.
The very
of the river.
sad thing is, and it would have to be done very carefully and nicely, because, anyways, the only remaining part of the Columbia River that has white water, where the salmon want to spawn, is where they left it so that it would pass by all these 7 nuclear power plants in the old days, in which they ran the river right through it. Through each one of those in the 60s and stuff, and made the river quite radioactive in the old days. They didn't even use a secondary cooling pipe system. They just radioactivized water of the Columbia as it was the mighty radioactive Columbia. Yep. Then they got caught on that wasn't too cool when one of the workers had their dosimeter go off after they were leaving to go home, and they took the Geiger counter across him, and it was his tummy. And then they found that they asked him what he ate for lunch, and he ate clams from the Columbia River's mouth, where it goes out in Astoria, in the mudflats of the estuary of the mouth of the Columbia River, were clams, and he ate canned clams for lunch from Astoria, and they were radioactive.
Wow.
And so they knew they'd made the whole friggin' river from Richland to Astoria radioactive in those days. Now a lot of silt is laid on top, and it's washed out to the Pacific since they had those 7 reactors shut down.
The solution to pollution is dilution. That's their idea.
Yeah, and then for a while they thought that the stored waste that was in tanks, and some had been directly in this rush to beat out the Russians in the Cold War time, they would sometimes experiment with various ways to make some of these new fuels and stuff. And they'd say, no, that didn't work. And they'd throw it all right next to the power plant in the dirt, in a pit, in a hole. A bulldozer would make a hole. They'd dump it in there and push dirt over it. And that's all throughout the Hanford, the bend in the river. And then that's above Richland, that bend. And it's all in that spot in these different things. And Columbia River Keepers has the map of where they did all these different operations in there. It's probably in the website of Hanford or something, if you look into it.
Well, this is the thing. We have known about this. Like, there's a couple of things that makes this urgent,
I had to say one last part about that with the river.
We have a sense of urgency, though, now, because it seems as if we've had some sense of wanting to take care of it and wanting to manage it and have some type of oversight,
Who's
right?
we?
Our country, our government.
Our country, yeah.
Like, they have really made an effort, but...
Department of Energy is that part of our country.
The last few weeks, though, the Trump administration literally has barred the Nuclear Facilities Defense Board from safety board from going on site to the Hanford site. They're not allowed to go on unless they are asked on. They're not allowed to talk to their employees anymore. They're not, unless the employees get clearance.
They're definitely up to some shenanigans. Is he with the Russians?
But this is the bad thing.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is...
He is.
But then we have the Department of Ecology telling us with this 107-page report that I found this week that there's a lot of very unstable...
That's the Washington Department of Ecology.
Yeah, it says hanford.gov. Mm-hmm. So that's where I found it, and that's where I downloaded it from there. Mm-hmm. And
Hanford itself has been operated by the Department of Energy, which I find just ridiculous that the Department of Energy uses up all its money on making weapons and being in charge of making missiles and stuff when they're supposed to be making windmills and nuclear power plants.
This is actually stunning. Louisa and I, we're getting off a little off topic here, Louisa.
I know. We have to return or start a different one.
Well, we got a few more minutes. I'm going to prod us on, but I
like this one. It's a good one.
I want to, today while we were doing research for this radio show today, we went to, what was it, worldnuclear.net. It was some Oversight, a pro-nuclear site that talked about what was MOX fuel, and we were reading about
yeah,
it.
I said, what is MOX fuel?
Yeah, and we started looking and studying into what exactly that is, because I'd said, well, all I know, it's like the worst stuff you can have. That was my thinking.
No, we had just read that about nuclear fallout, that the third reactor at Fukushima that blew 8 years ago had MOX fuel in it.
Right.
That meant it splatted into the air with a cloud that landed in Oregon, and that has plutonium in it. Some people think it was to make Hanford not be blamed for all the radiation in the area. Mm-hmm. They knew it would happen. Americans built Fukushima where
anyways, it is. Get back to the point here is, while we were doing this, we read on there that all of the nuclear power facilities in the world make 70 tons of plutonium a year. That's a lot of plutonium.
Yeah, they use MOX fuel all over the place. And there's 100 nuclear power plants that are commercial in America, but there's 11 that are going on right now at the militaries up the Columbia River system and the Snake River. About 2 hours drive from the Yellowstone and the Rocky Mountains is Idaho National Labs, nuclear labs. And that's run by the Navy in the old days for training. That's
also considered one of the legacy sites. It was involved in the Manhattan Project. And all the Manhattan Project sites are termed legacy sites. So, Louisa, we're 15 minutes in. I want us to talk about the actions that we took this week. So let's kind of leave this aside and talk about how this week, Louisa and I went over to see Ron Wyden's office this week.
Who's Ron Wyden?
Well, Ron Wyden is my senator and her senator.
My senator, yeah.
So I made an appointment with them a couple of weeks ago myself. When I started reading, I started spitting nails, to be honest, you guys, when I saw this thing about they changed the high-level radioactive waste to low-level, just unilaterally.
The name.
They just changed it by name, but you're not going to instantly make high-level waste into low-level waste just because you decide.
And that high level is what I was talking about, plutonium.
Right. So, but then the next week, they barred the Nuclear Safety Oversight Board. I was like, what? And now we get this report from Hanford that says there's a lot of falling apart buildings up there that really need urgent help. And they give these 4 things that what we could do, right? So this is the thing, that we have a sense of urgency. I mean, I called up Ron Wyden's office, and I call up all of my elected officials. In fact, I have been calling
with
them
the
daily.
Federal elected officials and
my
the
state. I call my state and my federal.
So who were your elected officials you called up?
I did call Nancy Nathanson's office.
She's what?
She's my state representative.
State rep of Oregon State Rep, okay?
Yeah, and she's from my district.
District, okay.
Right. And I think it's 13, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
And then my state representative is Senator Manning. He's my state senator.
To go to Salem, Oregon, and go to talk about Oregon issues, right?
Yeah, Nancy Nathanson works out of Salem also.
Right, and she's your representative, so she talks about this region.
Well, she's in the House.
Of the state of Oregon.
Yes.
Not the federals.
I'm not going to give like a civics lesson, Louisa. Let me just explain what we're doing here.
I am.
So, if you want me to give a civics lesson on how government works, we can use that for another day.
Well, that's what I wanted to do on this, is how to get to our elected officials.
All you have to do is type into Google. This is how simple it is.
Oh.
Who are my elected officials?
Great.
And there are several websites that will take you. You put whatever your zip code is in,
cool.
And it pops up. It tells you who your county commissioners are. It tells you who your state representatives are. It tells you who your federal representatives are. Very easy. And if you are not registered to vote, many of them will take you to sites that will register you to vote. And you can verify your voting status, too.
Thank you.
So those are good online tools that they do make very available to people.
All right.
So what I did was I actually printed out. I went to the website of the House.gov and the Senate.gov, and I looked for the list of representatives. I do this at every time we have an election, and I print out the names. The House has over 300 people, so it's several pages long. The Senate is 100 people, and it turns into one page with 50 on each name, single ones. And so I keep a file on my desk, and I also went to mediamatters.org, and they have a list of all of the news media's phone numbers. So I call MSNBC and give Rachel Maddow a Tokyo Rose alert all the time, as a matter of fact. Because she toes the party line. That's my opinions, though.
I don't even know who they are.
Yeah, so she's not a TV person. See, I'm an unabashed TV person.
I never watched
But
it.
I'm sort of a C-SPAN freak. But this is why it matters. So I called Ron Wyden's office, and then I told Louisa, and Louisa said, well, let's go together. So when we got there, Louisa asked if we could record and come as like the radio show.
And didn't you think, like I said, do you want to go by yourself and just do your own presentation, or do you think it would be better? And I said, I think it would be better to show two people.
Yeah, I agree. So we went together, and what I did beforehand was I actually got a little zip drive, and I put the articles that led me to the information that got me outraged on the Executive Order 140.
And me outraged.
Yes, Executive Order 140.1. I got that and put it on there. And I also got like a couple of newspaper articles that explain what that does. That's the one about reclassifying the nuclear waste and borrowing the nuclear safety, all of these things. And I put all of those. Did you put
the article about the fault line from the
Yes,
Earth Island Journal?
I gave that to them last time. Because I have gone there. This is the second time I've given them a zip drive of stuff, and she still has it.
Okay, good.
So I asked her. I did confirm that with her, that she
good,
still
good.
had it.
Yeah.
Did she need it again? She's like,
because
no,
that's the one that clinched me that I went, oh, we better shut it now.
Yes, but that was in 2014, you guys. And here we are, 2019, and the Columbia Generating Station is still open.
And got a good rating this year.
Louisa and I went in there. Now, this is a very bit of an interesting thing I would love to share with you. Louisa's idea was that we could videotape it and use it for our radio show for this evening or something like this. But June Chada, who is Ron Wyden's assistant, who I've been chatting with and talking to, she emails me. I met her at a protest here. She approached me because I said some things about Ron Wyden that weren't the most sympathetic, and she wanted to convince me he really cares about us. That's her job, and she does a good job, actually. She's awesome. But she basically said, look, if you come in here as the press, after that we can't see you as citizens. You're going to always be deemed the press. Did you get that?
I didn't.
Oh, you didn't hear that. So
good thing we came in as citizens.
That's what I said. That's why I knew that there was like you can only go the press way or the citizen way.
Okay.
I didn't know that it was irreversible though. So that was a bit of good information for those of you who think that you might want to go visit your senators.
Isn't that beautiful, the power of just being a citizen who's concerned and has found some good information that should be brought to your elected officials so they make wise, science-based decisions.
And fear-based decisions, because they know we're watching them too. They can't just ignore us. Like, that's really...
How about love-based? I want to say,
like, I think
I
that
love
they
you,
honestly
Ron
are
Wyden.
gonna, the reason we have Hanford and everything else in such a mess is because they've all been clicking their heels and saying Sig Heil. It's time for us to stop them.
Hey, how about we just say they work for us? Okay, because I am a citizen and they are eating up our taxes.
Well, see, this is the
They
thing.
gotta do what we need.
do understand this about our elected officials. They have their hearts in the right place, but they do understand the monsters that we're up against. It's not easy to buck these people because they can spend money and primary them out and get them out of office. So they walk a fine line of like...
And June has said that she, from Ron Wyden being Democrat, that they have their hands tied in the federal world because of Congress now being Republican controlled.
Yeah. You know what else she said? Was that it would be what really matters is having citizens like us go into their offices and making efforts and continually to voice our, not just one time, but she said it matters that you guys continue because it shows that you really mean it. It's not just something you saw on the newspaper.
I woke up this morning remembering her saying, thank you for bringing me this information because without that, we wouldn't have it because I didn't know about this and neither did Ron. And she's been his assistant for 26 years or something.
That is one of the things I learned from Donna Gilmore, and that is a website. Everybody who cares about the nuclear catastrophe, you can get great educational information for your own little neck of the woods at santanofresafety.org. She has a list of the whole tech. She has a list of the CAS, a literal list that she compiled of all the storage waste tanks in the country. And she tells us how, like ours at the Columbia Generating Station, there are 2 sets of CAS. They each have 27, we have a total of 27 casts, and they're all welded, and each one has 67 rods in it.
Or assemblies.
And they are just sitting there, those assemblies, yes.
Fuel assemblies.
It's just
that we hoped were uranium, but some might be not.
All of this is just sitting there, like it's just waiting for the. Imagine we are having earthquakes.
Well, how about we go into that Mark IV whatever reactor? GE Mark IV reactor is what is the Columbia Generating Station's nuclear machine,
identical to the one in Fukushima and at Pilgrim. Pilgrim was recently shut down because the judge deemed that Pilgrim was a danger to the environment to run. That's why, and that is honestly, Diane Turco said she's going to help me figure out how to make that argument to our elected officials.
Yeah, and here's the other thing. The reason that we're concerned is because that style of nuclear reactor puts the fuel safely inside the containment building above the reactor core. But as we saw, it all goes kablango and falls into the reactor core when it's having a meltdown, and all the waste fuel, and you have this huge critical thing, and it's all a humongous mess, and it keeps going on. Like Fukushima,
humongous.
It's having a freaking other type of explosion.
It's beyond comprehension. So the
nuclear waste can have consequent meltdowns. I do want to give some
information out to at least the people in our areas, in case. I'm not telling you what to do, but I am going to give you the phone number for Peter DeFazio, because we all have a right to call our congressman. If you feel like calling your congressman, Peter DeFazio, by the way, is the chairman of the Transportation Committee right now. And so the reason I called his office was that office there at the Transportation Department was to tell them, like, you guys have oversight
of the nuclear waste being transported with this new name that Trump is, with executive order, renaming the nuclear dangerous waste as fine, easy.
Low-level waste.
You can drive it right on a truck down the highway over to Utah or Texas
from
Hanford and the WIP site and from your nuclear power plants and just drive it on over and we'll take care of it.
And believe you me, his office was plenty interested. His Washington, D.C. office, here, let me give you his local Eugene office, 541-465-6732. I'm going to get going really quick. I'm going to also give you Jeff Merkley's phone number in case you want to call him.
What is Jeff? He is?
Jeff Merkley is our senator. He's our federal senator. Mm-hmm. He's in the Senate. We have 2 senators and 1 congressman.
In the federal. And this is in, every state has different, right? So this is Jeff Merkley in Eugene is 541-431-0229. Sorry, I had to squint to see that number. Is that Jeff Merkley? Oh, yeah, that was Ron Wyden's, you guys. I beg your pardon. Ron Wyden was that. Ron is our senator.
Ron is our senator, and Jeff Merkley is our senator. We have 2 senators. 541-431-0229. That is Ron Wyden's office. And that, if you go in there, you'll likely meet up with June Chada, the woman that we met with.
Yep.
She's adorable, actually.
And she has now been apprised of these concerns and wants to know more.
And if people call her, I will tell you it matters. They do listen when you do call. So I'm not telling you to call. I'm just giving you the phone numbers. It's 541. That is awful small. 541-465-6750. 465-6750. So I think we're just about out of time, as you heard my little beeper go off there just a minute ago. But thank you for joining us. Let me get ourselves back to wherever it is. We are here on our... Hold on, Pecan.
And we want you to shut the Columbia Generating Station any way you can.
Any way you can. The thing is, we want you to understand for yourself. We want you to get educated yourself. We're not telling you what to do. We are suggesting that there is a grave issue in our community that nobody talks about.
Actually, I'm calling out to you to please help me because I've been working on this a long time, and now we need to get it done now that we've heard about the earthquake.
Thank you for joining The Last Nuke. This is Lonnie Clark.
And this is Louisa Hamachek.
And you've been listening to The Last Nuke. This is Lonnie Clark with my co-host, Louisa Hamachek, on The Last Nuke, a radio program dedicated to help us permanently close the Columbia Generating Station, or as we call it, CGS.
CGS is the last commercial nuclear power plant in the Pacific Northwest at the federal Hanford Nuclear Site on the Columbia River in Richland, Washington. It's on top of newly discovered large earthquake faults, which could cause severe damage, resulting in a meltdown with radioactive fallout dust blowing in the winds of the northwest. And the contaminated cooling waters could spill into the Columbia River, passing Portland on its way into the Pacific Ocean.
Join us each week as we share information and actions we are taking to realize the immediate permanent shutdown of the CGS nuclear power plant to help safeguard our families, our friends, animals, and our environment. Thanks for joining us.